Good morning, everybody. Buongiorno. Benvenuti. So, dear colleagues and guests, I will not lose any more time. And good morning also to the people that are online with us. Welcome to this session dedicated to the much sought after proposal for regulation on the welfare of dogs and cats and their traceability, as well on the findings of the EU action plan on illegal pet trade. So last year we learned about the Still Mission Commission proposal on capped animals, on slaughter, on animal welfare labeling, yet we were pleasantly surprised by the publication of a proposal on the welfare of dogs and cats to introduce long overdue measures on their traceability, breeding practices, and imported animals. The new proposal for regulation addresses the online pet trade, where the sale of dogs and cats has exponentially increased, leading to conspicuous illegal trafficking and resulting in major problems for the welfare and health of the animals, for the well-being of prospective pet owners, and for public health in general. The EU Action Plan on illegal pet trade, which was carried out between July 2022 and July 2023, has been instrumental in spotlighting these problems, and today we will hear all about it. We received this proposal for regulation on dogs and cats with open arms, but still, as always, there is room for improvement. So, for example, shouldn't the proposed requirements be extended to other companion animals and not only limited to dogs and cats? The proposed exemptions on minimum welfare requirements for small establishments are hardly understandable. Aren't all animals' needs the same wherever they are? And also, shouldn't the breeding of brachycephalic pets or of breeds with extreme features be prohibited? We will have the opportunity to discuss all this further today. And then some announcement also. Before the start, I would like to give you a happy update on the oral question 5923 regarding the promised revision of the EU animal welfare legislation on the calls of the animal welfare related ECIs, which was co-signed by many members of this intergroup, so thanks for that. And due to the latest development of this week, it is now very likely that a debate on the oral question can take place during the March session. So I would therefore like to thank all colleagues who were involved in this, and in particular, because it was really an initiative from him, the oral question Niels Fulksang, for the successful orchestration, if I may say so, of this oral question demand. And then the vote for Animals 2024 pledge. Dear members, if you will run again for the next European elections, we really encourage you to take the Vote for Animals 2024 pledge, which will help you to profile yourself among the voters as a candidate and who will be dedicated to promoting animal welfare concerns during the next term. The pledge with the little QR code, if you did not do it yet, it's very easy, very simple to do, for the compilation of your details is available and also there at the entrance, or has been already given to you at the beginning of the sessions. Now I will give the floor shortly to Tommaso Navarra, the president of Parco Nazionale del Gran Sasso e Monti della Laga. Tommaso Navarra, the president of the Italian National Park of the Gran Sasso e Monte della Laga, is among us today and has asked to be given the floor shortly. The Gran Sasso National Park is one of the largest protected areas in Europe, with exceptional biodiversity. He will tell us more about it. Some of you will remember Tommaso from the past years, as he used to work for the MEP Marco Pannella. So, dear Tommaso, welcome back, I say then. The floor is yours for 2-3 minutes. Grazie mille.
Grazie signor Presidente, per noi è vero onore essere qui presenti. è in realtà un gesto anche di riconoscenza verso la vostra operatività e l'operatività della struttura europea, laddove il nostro animale simbolo, che è il camoscio d'Abruzzo, è stato protetto nell'ambito di una progettualità LIFE. Siamo stati premiati come miglior LIFE a livello europeo per quanto riguarda l'Italia, era ridotto a 27 esemplari, oggi è fuori la lista rossa dell'UCN perché abbiamo superato i 1000 esemplari. Entrare nel nostro parco vuol dire toccare con mano i 3/5 della biodiversità vegetale presente a livello continentale. Abbiamo oltre 72 specie di orchidee, 3 specie di piante carnivore e 2634 endemismi floreali, ma anche 12 coppie di aquile reali, 3 orsi bruni marsicani, e sappiamo come purtroppo l'orso bruno marsicano è ridotto a una popolazione estremamente ristretta, soltanto 50 esemplari a livello mondiale. Naturalmente oltre i cerbiatti, i 500 cervi. Peraltro il nostro parco abbraccia nell'Italia centrale 3 regioni, oltre l'Abruzzo, il Lazio e le Marche, per 5 province e 44 comuni. Questo vuol dire oltre 200.000 persone. Non siamo quindi Yellowstone che può chiudere la sbarra nel periodo invernale, ma viviamo, per dirla con Papa Francesco, in modo alto e altro la sinergia di protezione dell'ambiente che pratichiamo nei nostri borghi, nei nostri piccoli centri. Per avere un'idea, tutti i grandi film italiani, iniziare dalla Strada di Fellini all'Edi Hack oppure Il nome della rosa, sono stati girati nel nostro parco. Per poi ci sono delle immagini iconiche nell'ambito degli spaghetti western, in particolare sul campo Imperatore, che poi è il cuore del nostro parco, con la torre medicea di Santo Stefano di Sessagno, e qui mi permetto di sottolineare come se i nostri banchieri, in particolare Lorenzo De Medici, potevano prestare alle corti europee nascenti il profilo economico per sorreggerle, in realtà lo facevano da pecus pecunia, quindi pecora, pecus pecunia, perché avevano 5 milioni di pecore sul nostro territorio. Di qui una tradizione che recentemente abbiamo innovato, candidando e riuscendo a ottenere il riconoscimento della transumanza come patrimonio universale immateriale dell'umanità, patrimonio UNESCO. Per noi è vero onore essere qui e un ringraziamento va all'onorevole Bonfrisco che ha curato questa nostra possibilità di partecipazione. E al Presidente naturalmente.
E alla Presidente il libro.
Presidente, se posso permettermi, volevo anche donarle il libro ricordo della nostra presenza.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Grazie. Ecco.
Thank you again for your presentation, and it's really also nice to see all the jewels that we have in Europe and the places. Next time I'm in Italy, I promise I go there. So that's going to be pretty soon. So thank you very much for this presentation again. Now we come to really the intergroup with the subjects that we have foreseen to discuss on. And as always, I have to inform you that this is live stream, our meeting, and will be recorded. And of course, all the presentation will also then be online available on the intergroup website, and the interpretation we will have in English, French, German, Italian, and Polish. And now, without losing time, it's really a pleasure for me to give the floor to our first speakers, you all know him, I guess, Andrea Gavinelli and also Lucy Carouet, I hope I said it right, respectively the head of unit, the deputy head of unit at DG at Santé G3, European Commission, who will present us a new Commission proposal for regulation on the welfare of dogs and cats and their traceability. Dear Andrea, dear Lucy, the floor is yours.
Ok, inizio in italiano. Innanzitutto grazie onorevole Metz per ospitarci, ma anche perché mi piace ricordare che ho passato dei giorni bellissimi nel Parco Nazionale del Gran Sasso e è veramente un posto come italiani per esserne fieri. Per quanto le mie origini piemontesi posso dire veramente che è stato fatto un gran lavoro. Congratulazioni da parte di un semplice cittadino. Now I shift on my role as head of unit for animal welfare, and I shift to the English, being in this presentation more in this language and easier, and I also alternate with Lucy on this to make it more lively. Well, it's an honor to be here, because in fact a PowerPoint you have been through many years in life, and many, but this is the first one on dogs and cats and welfare that we ever saw in the European Union, so at least it should be less boring. Next slide. Where we come from. In fact, as you know, half of the European citizens have to deal with dogs and cats in their life. 80 million at least dogs and more or less the same number of cats are registered and owned by people in Europe, but many more are around, as we know. And we have been, and you will see with the presentation of the colleagues, seeing many of these citizens really worried about the condition of a market in which, especially with the internet sales, was looking more to the profit than to the quality and the welfare and the health of these animals and the families that sometimes are victims of abuse, the animals and the people, because you buy an animal that is dying in a few days or very aggressive or bringing you some diseases. These are happening very frequent, especially when you are also victim of commercials that are selling you certain breeds that are very popular. So to save money, you know, the dynamic is this. So practically speaking, some member states have already taken very good measures. We are now meeting in council already with member states, and we recognize that, like in Italy, in Belgium, or many, there are very important, good rules. But the problem is that we are a single market. And of course, because there are gray zones in this area, illegal trade is populating more and more. The risks of this buying and selling dogs and cats, even on the web, that is getting more and more popular. You will see the numbers later, it's not my task. But in fact, another problem is that many of these animals come from outside the EU. The source of it, for example, is Russia, and is going through Belarus, for example. This is what we saw, and you will see later. We have had also a great opportunity to consult the European Food Safety Authority, that is in fact, for the first time, was consulted and provided elements, technical and scientific, giving you really the hot spot where you know that an animal welfare is really in danger. And we see, for example, when you use an animal to breed and produce puppies till an age in which finally is killed just because it's not producing anymore, exhausted and destroyed. This is happening. And we will see this. So we did a staff working document, is ready and will be published soon with all these elements, what is called in technical language and jargon staff working document of the Commission. But in any case, it's where you have all the economics and the elements I summarized. Next slide. In fact, finally we had this proposal. I was dreaming it 10 years ago, to be honest, as an official. It takes time. But I'm lucky that all the things move together, and we had the elements to do it and the good motivation. It is, in fact, as you see, also to protect not only the animals, but also the citizens, the acquirers of the animal, because many are victims of these stories. Children also, because they wish an animal, and then the animal is in poor condition or very aggressive. And this because the breeding way, the way the animal is arrived is very stressed and very problematic to be managed. then sometimes it's also abandoned. That's what happens. So we are going to have more specific and propose to have more specific requirement for the traceability, for the establishments, for the entry into the EU, for non-responsible ownership, and for the people that are taking care of these animals in shelters or in the breeding farms. And now I give the floor to Lucie to keep on more detail.
Thank you, Andrea. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to dig in a bit on the content of the proposal. And in the proposal, we have really two main pillars. One which is about animal welfare rules in establishments, and one which is about the traceability of dogs and cats. So the first part about establishments is proposing to regulate breeding establishments, pet shops, and shelters. So breeding establishments is where you carry out activities of reproduction of dogs and cats for placing them on the market. Pet shops is clearly where you advertise dogs and cats for placing on the market, but they are not born in that establishments. And shelters are basically the establishments that collect unwanted, abandoned from a stray, lost or confiscated animals with a view to basically supply them to other new owners. The other part about traceability needs to differentiate the placing on the market, which is when you offer a dog or cat against money, with or without benefit, and the supplying, which is any transfer of ownership. So any transfer of ownership, it could be completely for free. In that proposal, we cover both, and we propose traceability for all supplies, dogs and cats placed on the market or supplied, except when this supply is an occasional supply which is not done online. So if you basically give away a dog or cat to your neighbor across your corridor, you are not covered because this is purely private. In the scope, we exclude dogs and cats intended for scientific purposes because there is a separate directive on this. Next slide. So in the part of the proposal which deals with animal welfare requirements in establishments, we have introduced some exemptions, some thresholds, because we need to be proportionate and we need to avoid going too far and ending up regulating really private persons who happen to have a litter, maybe not even planned. So this is why we have for this chapter 2 in our proposal the following threshold. So for breeding establishments, we exclude those who breed up to 3 females with 2 litters or less per establishment and per year. For the pet shops, we exclude those who keep up to 3 dogs or 6 cats. And for the shelters, we exclude those who keep up to 10 dogs or 20 cats. So they are only excluded from the animal welfare requirements in the establishments, but those who are below the thresholds I just described are still subjected to the identification and registration requirements for animals. And I pass back the floor to Andrea. We do a bit of ping pong.
Yes, but this way we like it. We work hand in hand as usual, and it's good. Next slide, in fact, is I take more the technical issue here. We are going to have some general obligations that are new for this area. I repeat, it's the first time we have rules in the European Union proposed. What is very interesting, and you can, logically the slide will be available, and so I focus only on what is, in my opinion, one of the most innovative things from the legal point of view. Normally, in welfare, you are having an enormous set of rules historically on the farmer, that is the caretaker of the animal. Here we are introducing an element that is the responsible ownership. It is also important, in fact, that when you are buying an animal, you must be aware that you are not buying just a toy. You have a responsibility of owning an animal. It's not something fashionable that you buy and then you forget. And this concept, with the legal base we have been able to develop it, so to have an obligation on who is selling to provide for who is owning, the capacity to know what is doing, to be aware of it. This is a very important element of innovation. And at the same time, is a way to prevent from the assessment we have done exactly the mistakes in, for example, bringing to the abandonment of animals in the streets. The visit of the veterinarian for an animal welfare purpose is also introduced. It's not new, but it's important also to underline that we bring more capacity of control. Turning slide to the next, we have then in the specific obligation, you see very important element that come also from the EFSA recommendation, that is important to see that we will set thresholds for the space allowances that you give to the animals in a breeding situation. When you have the possibility to do this, also is not to keep dogs indoor exclusively, but to give them an access outside. Of course, all these requirements will not come into force immediately in our proposal. It needs adaptation, and that's, of course, something we foresee for 5 years from our impact assessment. The next slide, we have also specific obligation for the health that I was mentioning already. So we have an age for the first pregnancy as a frequency of pregnancies and pregnancies beyond a certain age. This is an important element because the animal that are really submitted to this stress have been proven to suffer a lot when you go into this, we can say, industrial production of animals. We have also the prohibition of the restraining of the animals with few exceptions, and also important to say we are prohibiting mutilation except for the medical reasons. And this is just summarize the slide because time is running, and I give the floor to Lucie.
Next slide. So now you saw the actual requirements on the 5 domains, and to be able to check that these requirements are actually implemented in establishments, we have an obligation for approval of the breeding establishments. So the breeding establishments has to notify its activity, and then the competent authority needs to perform an on-site inspection in the establishment and grant a certificate and publish a list of approved breeding establishments. Next slide. When it comes to shelters and pet shops, we don't have a requirement for approval. We only have the requirement for notification and registration. So you will still know that these shelters and pet shops exist and are carrying out these activities, and the competent authority can perform inspections, but is not required to systematically do so before they can operate. Next slide. So now we move to the second pillar of the proposal, which is the traceability part that I mentioned earlier. So here, what we require, or what we propose to require, is that animals are microchipped for any supply of dogs and cats, and that dogs and cats kept in establishments are also microchipped and identified. And in addition to this, we propose that all of these animals are registered by a veterinarian or an assistant of a veterinarian in a database. The identification needs to be done at the latest 3 months after the birth in the breeding establishment. And the supplier, at the moment when there is a transfer of ownership, the supplier must be able to prove that the identification and registration has been done. The online, when this transfer of ownership is done via advertisement online, the online platform will need to inform the acquirer how they can check that this identification and registration is done and is authentic. And for this to happen, the Commission will develop an IT system through a website where the consumers, the buyers, will be able to go and actually enter the data given by the seller and check that this is correctly registered in a database. Next slide. The competent authority has some approval. They have to ensure that there is training available and approve that the content of the training. They have, of course, to establish the national database. Many member states already have database, in particular in the case of dogs, a bit less so frequent for cats. And on top of that, what we are introducing is a new system of interoperability of those databases so that the systems can communicate. The Commission will be in charge of developing the standards so that this interoperability is functioning in practice. Next slide. We have a quite new element here because we also require compliance or equivalence with EU standards at import into the Union. So the dogs and cats entering from non-EU countries into the EU will follow the same or equivalent standards, and we will check this through different tools. The third countries will need to be listed, the establishments in the third country will need to be listed, and the certificate, the health certificate which is used to import the dog and the cat will contain an attestation confirming that the welfare rules were checked and correct. The microchipping applies as well for import, and because we cannot require third countries to have the databases that are interoperable with the EU one, we require the registration of the dog and cat within 48 hours of entry into the Union. Next slide. Then we have some procedural provisions, maybe no need to enter into details. The main one is the fact that stricter national rules remain permitted in certain areas. And I think we can move to the last slide, which is to conclude. Maybe some remark in conclusion. We have here a proposal that is based on two legal bases, the internal market legal basis and the agricultural legal basis. And so the EU competence is focusing really on ensuring the good functioning of the market of dogs and cats and a high level of welfare in that market. So we are not here able to go into handling of dogs and cats by pet owners or other issues such as management of the stray dog population. And maybe another remark is that because we try to manage the market of dogs and cats and for this to fight against illegal trade, we need a very comprehensive and robust traceability system with a wide scope. As Andrea mentioned, it is for the suppliers to raise awareness on responsible ownership, but we cannot introduce requirement on what actually is done by the pet owners afterwards. And maybe a last remark is that because we have this framework in terms of legal basis and EU competence, there are also other market actors that play a role. For example, those who organize the shows, competitions, and promote some models of breedings that may be linked to animal welfare problems that can be reflected upon. I think I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. A lot of questions came already to my mind, but first of all, we go to the second presentation, and I'm very pleased to invite the second speaker, Georgia Diamantopoulou. I think I forgot an O, but okay, EU Companion Animal Policy Coordinator at 4 Paws, who will give us the NGO's point of view on the proposal. Dear Georgia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Georgia. I work at 4 Paws, which is, yeah, we can pass to the first slide, please, which is an international animal welfare organization with a global footprint. And our aim is mainly to protect animals that are under direct human influence. I think I'm not only speaking on behalf of 4 Paws, but also representing the animal welfare community when I say that we're very, very happy with this proposal. So we would like to thank very much the European Commission for all the work and the effort they have put in it. It's a much-awaited piece of proposed legislation, and not only does it reflect our calls as animal welfare community working for decades on the ground, trying to address the illegal pet trade, trying to track the networks, protect the animals, but also it addressed the concern of the European Parliament, who for years has been consistently asking for, through resolutions, for measures that would eventually be able to address one way or another the loopholes that are created by the existing regulatory framework and make the illegal trade in companion animals possible. So again, once more, thank you so much. We can pass on to the next slide, please. What I have chosen to include in my presentation is if you want, snippets of our experience working on the ground. We have a dedicated investigations team which is doing a fantastic job in trying to, in a way, identify the illegal pet trade and understand the industry. So one thing that we felt was a bit concerning as part of the proposal is the exemption afforded for the so-called small breeders. We feel this is an oversight to not extend the very basic, fundamental requirements found within this legislation to anyone who is breeding and selling cats and dogs. And here you can see two examples of so-called small breeders, not necessarily advertising online, but also from word to mouth. As you can see in the first picture, we're seeing brachycephalic dog, which has been subject to mutilations. Obviously, within the proposal, there are also exemptions afforded to small-scale breeders. And in the second picture, you can see an operator who is, again, posing as a hobby, occasional breeder. And if I may say, we have felt that the animal health law had already, in a way, sorted that part out. I'm thinking of recital 99 of the animal health law, which gave the general direction of the legislation, which basically says that when the breeding and selling entails a degree of organization and activity, then it should be subject to the registration obligation because it's a public health risk. And as you can see also in the pictures, there is definitely public health risk. Then we go to Article 84 of the Animal Health Law, requiring registration of all breeding establishments. Then implementing regulation of 2022-1345 came in, which explicitly says that the establishments that are keeping cats, dogs, and ferrets cannot be exempt by the registration obligation. And although we have felt that was quite clear, what we have seen that is interpretation on a member state level that does not necessarily follow this norm. So we're seeing different standards even today in terms of which establishments do member states consider as subject to the registration obligation. Obviously, where that leaves us is in many operators being active under the radar, completely unregulated. And essentially the fallacy of excluding anyone, essentially, who is breeding and selling opens the door to what the coordinated control plan, the very recent one, but also the previous one, showed, which is, and again, also congratulations to the Commission, to G5 for this work, being the driving force in showing the scale of the problem. Basically, what we have been witnessing as part of our daily job was, in a way, likely for the first time on such a scale, shown to the EU, to member states, as part of their effort in understanding the landscape of breeding. So what did this coordinated control plan show, as in also the previous one? It showed a divergence between the stated status of operators and their actual volume of activity, which means people posing as hobby breeders, while in fact their produce is massive and it's commercial. We have, as part of our work, also trying to understand how much that disadvantages legitimate breeders who responsibly breed animals. And we came to the conclusion that occasionally the disadvantage for them comes down to about 75 to 80% to essentially what is the turnover compared to illegitimate breeders. Because obviously costs are kept very low and the profit margins stay high when there is no veterinary care, when there is no appropriate facilities to host the animal and so on. And then what we have seen, and it was also witnessed in the coordinated control plan, is the exploitation of the non-commercial scheme to trade animals. Essentially, this means the abuse of the pet passport system, and I'll come back to that one later. Basically, animals being moved cross-border for private purposes, while in fact the purpose is commercial, it's trade. Finally, on that point, it has been a problem for us, for the authorities, the lack of data. There is no information consistently collected on the number of breeders operating on a member state level. And we would think that that would have been sorted already as part of the implementation of the animal health law. We fear that if there are exemptions afforded as part of this regulation, this problem shall pertain. And if anything, you need to have a mapping of operators to then understand what establishments you need to control if needs be. Just to say that, especially in the second case, the matter was brought to the attention of the authorities because eventually consumers complained. And what the authorities found is someone who is operating very consistently in an organized way without respecting the veterinary sanitary provisions set by the EU and national legislation. And yeah, there was no chance that this operator would have been subject to any control if it was not for the consumer themselves who eventually pointed out to this establishment. We can move on to the next slide, possible? Thank you very much. And I'll explain. Another concern we have around the proposal is around the matter of traceability of individual animals. Of course, we very, very, very much welcome the identification and registration requirements. Microchipping and registration is something we have been asking for years. It's really the cornerstone of individual animal traceability, of disease traceability. So we feel that it's going to be a missed opportunity if this is not applied uniformly to all cats and dogs. And I understand how that sounds. It sounds challenging. But it might be possible, it's possibly the biggest challenge of this regulation, which in a way gives it's also its beauty. It will make it future-proof. As we said before, there is a massive abuse, and we see that still today on a daily basis. There is a massive abuse of the pet passport scheme, which is used for commercial purposes. And we have seen that the existing regulatory but also enforcement framework and the provisions cannot really detect, let alone prevent such practices. Identification registration for all cats and dogs will essentially have the incidental effect of benefit, if you want, of ending this exploitation, this abuse of operators commercially active under the guise of non-commercial movement. Furthermore, we feel that in principle it's possible, it's latent within every cat and dog to become part of an economic activity. And this is something that cannot be necessarily determined at birth of a litter. If all of the, say, all the offsprings, some of them, none of them, will eventually become part of this, if you want, trade chain. And since it's not, easy to precise that, it creates significant loopholes for trade. For example, if an animal becomes part of this chain down the line at a later age, where you risk with a retrospective registration of data to compromise the reliability of the information that's been recorded, and essentially creating also barriers to trade. And for us, this is a very important point because we have seen from the EU legislation that it never operated really on the grounds of eliminating existing barriers to trade, but also it has been a basic, in a way, principle and precedent said that the barriers anticipated would be also considered, as they might as well create, they can be as damaging for the operation of the single market. And I don't know if I'm good on time. I need to speed things up, I guess, right? I'll speed things up. Essentially, we have seen this precedent in European legislation, but also in jurisdiction with the European Court of Justice, several verdicts, especially on tobacco products, on novel foods, on the official controls regulation. So Article 114, we feel, definitely affords the opportunity for the identification registration of animals for the smooth functioning of the internal market. What we see here is an accident that happened some years ago in Germany. It was a movement from Eastern Europe to Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Essentially, the accident, not the interception, resulted into the finding that hundreds of the dogs which were transported were actually somehow transported under the non-commercial scheme. For the rest of them, they had forged paperwork, health certificates, traces documents. So eventually we see that, and also obviously it was extremely hard to define the veterinary status of those animals, their vaccination status. This, in a way, severely disadvantages like public revenue, amongst other things. And just one thing on stray animals was said before. We also feel that stray animals are part of an economic activity. And the reason is that very often their management is assigned as a contract to companies. So these contracts are part of public competitions, and essentially those companies are reimbursed per capita, the animal that they catch, transport, and treat. So stray animals are already part of an activity that, pertains to the economy. And finally, if we can move on to the next slide, please, and I'll conclude. One thing that we see as very important as part of this proposal, it also affords, Article 114 affords the opportunity for the inclusion of species that are not cats and dogs, and they're kept, unfortunately, as pets. Here you can see the private keepership of lion cubs in Eastern Europe. This obviously severely disadvantages the internal market, let alone the welfare of animals. It has been also something that the European Parliament has been very much insisting on traditionally, the inclusion of an EU positive list. We feel there is an opportunity within this proposal to create at least the empowerment for the Commission to down the line introduce a list. And right now there is a feasibility study at the European Commission, an impact assessment, which will be concluded at a later stage in 2025. But then, of course, we're in a way missing a chance to jump onto this one. So I will just conclude with this one. These are the 3 key points that we see. And again, thank you very much to the European Commission, Unit G3 and G5 for your fantastic work in bringing what we see today. Thank you, and it was a much anticipated one.
Thank you very much, Georgia, for this presentation. And I'm glad also to introduce our last speaker, Alicia Musnik from the Agri-Food Fraud team at DG Santé G5, European Commission, who will present us the findings and way forward of the EU enforcement action plan on the illegal pet trade. Alicia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm indeed here to share with you some insights on the enforcement action on cats and dogs, how we found the proofs that the illegal trade of cats and dogs is EU-wide spread problem, and how we confirmed that it is indeed, as my predecessor spoke, unfair and cruel business, and that we really need good traceability system for animals to fight it. First slide, please. Yes, so detecting and fighting fraud in agri-food chain is a responsibility of member states under the provision of official controls regulation. Member states, whenever fraud is detected, use secure platform system, IRAS, to exchange information, data, to support each other, request administrative assistance. And since the scope of OCR has been extended, it's December 2019, animal health and welfare became part of it. And since then, as you can see on the graph, notifications, exchanges regarding cats and dogs has been growing steadily and overcome the primary reason for the system, which was the food product. So this shows clearly the interest of the national authorities, the impact of the controls. Next slide, please. Following growing importance, of course, of the subject and high amount of notifications that we see in IRAS, Commission, together with member states, agreed on performing the enforcement action. We work in frame of the EU Agri-Food Fraud Network. Those are our experts in member states, where for the purpose of the action, subgroup was created, combining veterinary expertise plus e-commerce plus here customs and police authorities. Only in the period of the action, 467 notifications were created in IRAS. I'm maybe stressing it because it's important. We do not have a global overview of the trade. We are basing ourselves on the notification in IRAS, which might be influenced by the countries who are reporting and the problems that they were focusing on. The participation was voluntarily, and even despite that, the activity of the group, the amount of actions taken was really significant and showed how relevant the problem is and how important authorities are finding, despite very big strains on the resources. The time and effort was strongly put in there. Next slide, please. Go to the meritum. If it comes to the findings, as Georgia said, first, the most striking issue that we discovered that was reappearing in the notification, in the discussions during our meetings, was that indeed the commercial activity is often disguised as a non-commercial movement. And this brings a lot of issues with lack of documents. This is done to avoid the veterinary checks. Often tax evasion is involved. Part of the problem is when the animals come from non-EU countries that are authorized for trade, but we had also notification. There's a list of countries from which the trade of cats and dogs today is not allowed, but not non-commercial movement. So we have animals coming from those countries as so-called puppies with up to 5 animals. You can cross-border regularly. Every week they do that. So here cooperation with customs is really crucial, so they can get notification, spot the person that is recurrently crossing with their own pets and coming back to the country of origin. Here on this slide, the main modus operandi is displayed, and then there are 4 routes. You can have, in the report, it's of course described in the detail. We have published the report on the 7th of December. I encourage you to have a look to it. And minding the time, maybe I will just focus today on the second case, because we do have, as Andrea mentioned, high traffic from the eastern border. Russia and Belarus are sourcing the animals, especially using the non-commercial movement, to the very high extent. Forged documents are all over the place, and the big issue is also rabies. The animals are not vaccinated, or even if in the passport that the vaccine sticker is there. I will go to that problem later. And Latvia, Poland did the checks, and it proved, despite of the animals being proved as vaccinated, they did the blood sample test, and they had absolutely no antibodies for rabies, which only, based on this small sample of checks, shows how big is the problem if you expand it for the thousands of animals that every month cross the eastern border of the EU. So the third issue is the Romanian shelters and the traffic through them, which is also a very big issue, and the forged documents for pets coming from Turkey. Here it's mostly the Netherlands who is notifying it, the big controls in the Schiphol airport, but also Germany and Austria are facing this issue. So if you could click on the number 2 to display, no, go back to previous slide, please. The number 2, if you could click on the 2. Yes. So here you can see it doesn't work. You have to click on the number 2, little digit 2. Okay, it doesn't work. Nevertheless, animation doesn't work. You should see the map. So for the Serbian case was the biggest case we saw in many notifications coming from different member states, so it's not geographically lined up. Member states started discovering that exactly the same names of operators, veterinarians, breeders, transporting companies are reappearing in the documents. We in Sante have overview of all the exchanges between member states, because if, let's say, country A sends information to country B, only those 2, for the security reason, can see it, then country C and D the same. And in Sante, we administrate the system, having global overview of all of it. It's a huge amount of data to process, and that's what we are doing, trying to spot the recurrences, to see some kind of patterns. And in this action, it was very clearly visible how the organized network are behind this trade because of the recurrences of the elements that we were able to collect. And in the Serbian case, right now, because the work continues, we are reaching around 100 notifications involving very similar patterns or exactly the same names, as I said. Also, we are looking to the passport numbers, because that's also an issue. Often passports are forged, of course. Sometimes passport is real, falsified information is input to it. The origin of the passports can differ. Sometimes veterinarians are claiming that they have been stolen from them. Sometimes we do have cases when they admit that they were bribed, sold. The cases are really different and plenty. So having all of this, of course, it starts bearing real criminal activity, which is above the scope of administrative authorities. That's why cooperation with law enforcement is really crucial. And here I can say that we are really proud of relation that we were able to establish, the bridge between law enforcement and administrative authorities. This is thanks to Europol colleagues who are, you have to understand that for the police forces, illegal trade of cats and dogs is not a priority in many cases. Not many member states have envy crime units developed. So we are very happy to see that this is changing, this is moving forward. And in the case of Serbia, the actual task force was created, the real measures were taken, investigations are still ongoing, so I will not be giving you more details to that. But the actions are taken, and this is really a good success story. Hopefully it will follow for the other routes and patterns that we are discovering every day while analyzing data. If you could go to the next slide, this gives an overview of the actions of all the things that are being done underground to prepare for the inspections, controls, and the investigations, to be sure that they are able to target controls, because especially if the non-commercial movement is involved, it is very difficult to stop all the cars that are possibly having puppies, very often in the trunks, unfortunately. So it's very random. Sometimes most of the notifications would be coming from only random checks on the road. So we are trying to target them. Here, as I mentioned, cooperation with customs, the risk information form is created where information is shared about the vehicles or companies who are suspicious, to make sure that they are targeted on the borders, and because they have been seen regularly crossing, or that they are falsifying documents, the notification is being done. The same for the police, cooperation with law enforcement. And the action wouldn't probably have that big dimension if not the great cooperation with NGOs, with Forpos, I would like to really thank you also to Eurogroup and the EU Cats and Dogs Alliance, who were supporting the whistleblowing part, providing a lot of information from the ground, which were then sent to the authorities to perform targeted inspections, controls, and investigation, and also the e-commerce aspect. The NGOs were a great help for tracing the suspicious advertisements online, because very often member states do not have resources to cover the internet. I hope also now with the new changes, also with the Digital Services Act, this will be a little easier, but for now that was it. And the last slide, please, to just give you the information about what's now, because the action ended, of course, but, well, we did not solve the problem, but that wasn't the purpose either. We are trying to establish cooperation. Without the cooperation, especially inter-services, we will not reach anything. Georgia mentioned lack of data. Lack of data is also on, I maybe wouldn't say even lack of data. We have lots of data, but information is restricted to singular services. We need the interoperability, interconnectivity between databases. So from my perspective, from the enforcement side, it would be customs, police, administrative authorities, veterinarians register, so they all can very easily exchange, check, and follow up on the cases whenever the suspicion, wherever irregularity pops out, because this is the only way. And that's what, for example, we are very happy to, I'm happy to tell you, we managed to agree with the Turkish authorities, for example, because part of our job is increasing cooperation with non-EU countries. And indeed, following all the discussions, of course, it took some time. Now we have agreement, bilateral cooperation, then appointed the contact point for the issue of illegal trade of cats and dogs. That's the route 4. That's how we are planning to tackle. And for example, they produce the QR code on the forgery of test titration for rabies. So now control authorities just have to scan the QR code on the document, which gives the information about the health certificate, about the real information that should be there, which is a great achievement, and it will improve the controls significantly. Here on that side also meetings with the aviation associations, which gave the training, informed how to control cats, dogs when they are boarding the plane. So step by step, the changes are possible and they are happening. Of course, it all takes time, but we are going in the good direction. From our side on the data analysis, we use IRAS. I showed you almost 500 notifications in 1 year of the action. Now we are a few months after, amount of work did not increase. In opposite, because of the cooperation that is being built, because of the know-how now, which system to use, how to use it, which network, or even simple contact in your phone to which other authorities reach out, improve the situation. And now authorities exchange even more, even braver, better quality of information is provided. And having all of it in Sante, we are all understaffed, under-resourced, of course, but we are now employing the AI to help us out to read, because imagine if you would have to read all those documents in the hundreds of notifications. We have been doing it manually so far. So spotting the same passport number or the same even name of the breeder, it's becoming tricky. Now the artificial intelligence is helping us with that, and we hope for even better results in the future, because it showed it worked really well, and it provides a really nice insight to the intelligence and the investigations further. The thing I've not said clearly before, it's the industry. We started inquiring with vaccines, especially rabies vaccines industry, because the forgery of vaccine sticker became a real problem. Very often, the modus operandi, the idea is that you take the one, or you base yourself on the one real sticker, and with the same lot number, so you don't even change lot number because it's very carefully chosen number, but they do change the expiry date, for example. So over the years, you are reusing exactly the same sticker, the same, how it looks like, just the expiry date is being changed. So of course it shows that the same person is behind the production of it, and they are not even bothering the lot. We spoke with the experts, and it is clear that the security measures for the stickers of vaccine has decreased significantly over last years. Industry is cutting costs on that. Used to, they were UV protected. There were some more measures to it. Now it's not being done, which makes life of fraudsters even easier. And this is unacceptable, because we are talking here about the veterinary medicine, which is used for official certification. So we have a meeting next week, thanks to the animal health group, with the industry to discuss that and see at least another one more element to the document forgery, which is a huge issue to be tackled. Inter-service data exchange, I think I stressed that enough. We're now trying to put working on the legal basis for exchange of personal data as well with customs and police to update our legislation. And we do work very closely with Europol, case-based, depending on the issue, like the example of Serbian case, but not only. And lastly, I will mention the Impact platform, where in the frame of the NV crime, we are co-leading the action, among the others, on pet trade. This is very important because it really brings the people together. We invite also NGOs in the ForPost participated, give a training last year in that frame, because it's very important that not all police officers have a veterinary background, if any. So the knowledge, expertise, at least the basics to help them out during the first encounter in control, it's really relevant. So we are doing that. We are building guidelines. We are doing training, and hoping that will show better for the future. So that's it from me. I'm sorry for my voice, I'm a little bit sick. The presentation had to be kept short, so if you have any more technical questions, details, do not hesitate. We are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you for coming despite you're a little bit ill, so thank you very much, very appreciated. So now we have left 26 minutes for discussion, and the very first that raised her hand, was Manuela Ripa. You have the floor for the first question.
Thank you very much, and I also would like to start thanking the Commission for this proposal that was very long awaited, and I would have wished, like you, to see it much earlier, because now we have the European elections and then it will be delayed by this, so it's a pity, but nevertheless, thank you very much. Together with Petras, who is also here in the room, as co-chair of the Companion Animal Working Group, we fought very hard to have this law, also together with Four Paws and other organizations, and we had many expert hearings how to tackle illegal pet trade, especially the puppy trade, and we even visited Europol, that was already mentioned about that. Today I would like to ask about this law, how it can holistically protect cats and dogs, because let us just take the example of how inhumane and barbaric the situation is for galgos, for dogs used for hunting in Spain that are bred there and tortured in the end to death. These dogs were exempted from the animal welfare law in Spain, using as excuse that hunting with such dogs is part of the cultural heritage of Spain, and therefore they could not be treated as companion animals. So my question would be here to the Commission: how will you secure with this law that this uncivilized treatment of these poor hunting dogs will be changed and that there will be no loopholes allowing this animal cruelty to continue? Maybe also Georgia can give us an insight on that one. The second thing is that I completely share the worrying about the exemption of small breeders, because there is a risk that private breeders will use this to circumvent the regulation. So maybe the Commission could explain more why they kept them out. And the third question that I would have is, Georgia already mentioned it, it's not about only cats and dogs. There are a lot of wild animals that are kept in European homes as companion animals, but it's a lot online trading here, and there also bear the risk of zoonosis, of spreading of diseases. So why did not the Commission also look at these animals, especially as we had an event in the European Parliament presenting this positive list and showing member states that are already using this positive list, for example, Luxembourg. So my question to the Commission would be here: do you see the opportunity that we could include this positive list in this law? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for these very important questions. One of them was also mine, so very good, you took it already. Maybe we take also Caroline, and then we go to the experts, and then I have Annika already, and also here, sorry, I forgot your name, but we will note you down, that's for sure. Anna, certo. Caroline.
Merci Tilly. Et merci à la Commission pour cette proposition. C'est vrai qu'on l'attend depuis maintenant longtemps. Elle est là aujourd'hui. Mais moi, j'ai un certain nombre de questions. Alors, sur les élevages de chiens, sur l'expérimentation animale, je sais qu'il y a une directive spécifique pour cela. Mais je reviens sur les chiens de chasse, puisque on utilise ces chiens justement à la chasse. On se retrouve avec des mauvais traitements généralisés, que ce soit sur la chasse à courre. Et tu en as parlé sur l'Espagne. On a sur l'Espagne un abattage systématique des chiens, entre 30 et 40 000 chiens abattus dans des conditions effroyables. Ce sont des chiens qui sont sous-alimentés en règle générale. Et puis, on se débarrasse de ces chiens à l'âge de 3-4 ans. On nous répond, c'est la tradition. Soit on pend ces chiens et on les laisse à l'agonie pendant 3 jours, soit on les jette dans un puits. Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose de prévu spécifiquement à ces chiens de chasse? Parce que ce sont des chiens qui sont utilisés. Alors souvent, on nous dit que c'est la tradition, mais voilà. Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose de spécifique prévu par rapport à ces chiens de chasse? Merci.
So I don't know who want to react first, and then we take the other questions. Andrea or Lucy or yeah. They coordinate a little bit, and then.
Ok, je vais commencer ensuite, Andrea complétera. Concernant cette question du champ d'application de la proposition, donc effectivement, comme on a essayé d'expliquer, on essaye de proposer de réglementer les établissements. Et donc ça veut dire que, par exemple pour les chiens de chasse, l'élevage des chiens de chasse est couvert, mais ensuite leur utilisation par les chasseurs pour la chasse n'est pas couverte. Parce que c'est pas considéré comme une activité économique, c'est une activité culturelle, si vous voulez. Mais l'élevage, effectivement, est couvert. Donc, par exemple, à titre d'exemple, les dispositions qu'on propose sur l'interdiction des mutilations, qui sont pratiquées dans certains États membres pour les chiens de chasse, s'appliquent. Et donc, les éleveurs qui élèvent des chiens de chasse ne pourront pas mutiler dès le début les animaux. Concernant les exemptions pour les petits établissements, on a essayé de... Alors, on comprend tout à fait le point qui a été soulevé à la fois par Georgia et par Madame Ripa. L'idée, c'est qu'il faut aussi prendre en compte les gens qui ne font pas de la fraude. Donc, il existe effectivement des personnes privées qui peuvent, de manière tout à fait occasionnelle, faire une activité de reproduction, et il ne serait pas proportionné de leur appliquer toute la série d'exigences, de l'exigence d'approbation, etc. Ça deviendrait très compliqué. Dans un certain nombre de cas, ça se fait à la maison, dans un espace tout à fait privé, et donc on doit trouver un équilibre de manière à effectivement améliorer le marché tel qu'il fonctionne à l'heure actuelle, sans entrer dans la sphère complètement privée. Et Andrea voulait compléter?
Sì, in italiano. Il principio, veniamo alle domande sul perché non altri animali da compagnia o animali tenuti nelle case degli europei, ma il principio che ha diretto l'azione dell'Unione Europea, della Commissione Europea, è di un principio ovviamente legato a un'armonizzazione del mercato. È chiaro che quando parliamo di cani e gatti, in particolare, il mercato è oggi frammentato, in quanto abbiamo regolamenti nazionali di diversa intensità, restrittivi più o meno, e è un fenomeno comune praticamente in 25 Paesi membri, se non di più. Ce ne sono 2 dove non vi è un sistema di identificazione, per esempio. È chiaro che l'intervento e lo scopo d'azione è stato un target esattamente legato alla base legale che avete visto, che è la base del mercato unico, collegata alla base che è l'articolo sull'agricoltura. Effettivamente questo ha permesso alla Commissione di agire in questo momento. È lo scopo principale. È chiaro che per quanto riguarda altre specie animali detenute nelle case degli europei, la situazione e l'analisi che noi abbiamo potuto fare, è stato citato infatti un'analisi di impatto che è in corso ma non è conclusa, è stata citata da Giorgia. Effettivamente non abbiamo elementi per poter giustificare un'azione in questo caso. Si tratta comunque di un elemento che non è un elemento di minore importanza per quanto gli aspetti di salute pubblica e di salute animale, che sono comunque regolati sotto certi aspetti anche dal regolamento sulla salute animale. Per quanto riguarda poi il discorso degli altri scopi, come per esempio l'utilizzo nella sperimentazione, abbiamo una regolamentazione già precisa che gestisce il problema in questo senso e gestisce quello che è il rapporto tra gli Stati membri. È chiaro che avremo situazioni borderline, è la prima volta che discutiamo questa situazione a livello europeo, è una discussione che coinvolge il Consiglio in questo momento, ma anche il Parlamento, e quindi speriamo di riuscire a mettere sul tavolo un accordo finale che aiuti a vedere in progressione questa prima norma. È il primo passo, senza dubbio. Grazie.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the other experts want to add something, but I think the questions were all covered. So I will give the floor then to Annika and then to Anna.
Alors, merci beaucoup Tilly, merci à nos intervenants. Je vais faire deux apartés parce que après j'aurai une question de la Commission. Je suis allée en début de mandature à Castilla de la Mancha, vous parliez, j'étais très interpellée par le cas et forcément des Galgos et des Podenco. J'ai rencontré le président de la chasse là-bas, évidemment avec toute la diplomatie pour faire passer le message, il reniait complètement tout ce qu'on pouvait dire. Évidemment, il disait que tout ce qu'on avançait était faux. Je suis allée même rencontrer le ministre de l'Agriculture en Espagne, qui était très évasif et je n'ai pas eu de réponse. Donc, on voit que c'est vrai que c'est l'importance d'avoir une harmonisation des lois au niveau des États membres sur ce sujet. Et d'autre part, je pensais aussi à l'expérimentation animale, vous en avez parlé. Je suis allée quand même à Ispra en Italie, où le Parlement a fait quand même un truc fabuleux, où il travaille sur l'expérimentation hors animaux, c'est-à-dire sur l'expérimentation in vitro, in silico, et voilà. Et donc on peut se demander, c'est magnifique et tout, on a eu c'est très encourageant, mais on ne voit aucune application au niveau concret, au niveau du Parlement ou de la réglementation des États membres. Maintenant, je vais revenir à la question concernant la traçabilité. Il y a quelques mois, j'avais déposé une question écrite donc, à la Commission européenne pour demander la numérisation des certificats zoosanitaires, mais aussi des autres documents délivrés par les autorités compétentes. Et je pensais notamment à ce que vous avez évoqué pour les passeports. Alors, dans sa réponse, la Commission européenne m'a assuré que les certificats zoosanitaires qui doivent accompagner donc, les mouvements des chiens et des chats dans l'Union étaient notifiés par donc, les États membres par la voie électronique via Trace, la plateforme mise en place donc par la Commission, ce que je félicite d'ailleurs. Néanmoins, elle m'a également indiqué que les passeports de ces animaux de compagnie étaient toujours au format papier, même s'ils étaient délivrés par des vétérinaires agréés par les États membres. Alors le passeport en papier, comme vous l'avez relevé, quand même est un facteur de fraude, c'est beaucoup plus facile sur un format papier. Je souhaiterais donc savoir si cette faille va être comblée par la proposition de règlement. Et la référence, en effet, dans la proposition à une identification et un enregistrement dans une base de données nationale n'est pas clair. Alors, ma question est, est-ce que concrètement, les passeports seront toujours au format papier? Voilà, merci.
Merci beaucoup, Annika. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Grazie a tutti i relatori che ci hanno dato una ampia panoramica di quello che non siamo riusciti a fare in questi anni, perdendo anni importanti che ci hanno allontanato da una percezione della società, da una sensibilità e una cultura crescente nella società. E io mi sento in ritardo e anche in fallo nel non essere stati capaci noi, come istituzioni europee, di dare delle risposte che tutto sommato erano semplici, non c'era nulla di difficile. E abbiamo aumentato il divario tra cittadini e istituzioni europee su un tema che è diventato sempre più caro alle persone. Io mi accodo alle colleghe e al loro appello per i cani da caccia in Spagna. Io ne ho adottati 3 e conosco da vicino la sofferenza di questi cani. Com'è possibile che noi ancora tolleriamo questo fenomeno come altri in Spagna verso altri animali? E vengo subito alle mie 2 domande. Nel grande tema della raccolta dei dati, ignoriamo un potenziale che invece potrebbe portarci ad avanzare nel futuro anche dal punto di vista scientifico e forse economico, che è la raccolta del DNA di questi animali, perché questi piccoli dati che noi andiamo raccogliendo, e peraltro nemmeno ci riusciamo, sono dati poco indicativi rispetto alle esigenze di un futuro ormai vicino, sempre più scientifico e sempre più importante per le nostre vite e per quel concetto di One Health che dobbiamo portare avanti. E se le vendite online fossero abolite, vietate nell'Unione Europea, noi toglieremmo al tema criminale del traffico di animali uno degli strumenti più potenti e importanti. Perché non lo facciamo? Grazie.
Thank you very much. Who wants to? Lucy.
Ok, je vais commencer avec la première question donc, concernant les passeports. Effectivement, à l'heure actuelle, les passeports se font en format papier et pas électronique. Mais la proposition qui est sur la table ne touche pas à ce point parce que les passeports proviennent de la législation sur la santé animale. Et la proposition législative que nous avons mise sur la table se focalise sur le bien-être animal et n'amende pas la législation sur la santé animale. C'est la simple raison d'articulation juridique, si vous voulez. Donc ce n'est pas dans le texte, tout simplement.
Prendo la parola perché la questione sollevata, ringrazio l'onorevole Bonfisco se non sbaglio, è una questione che guarda un po' l'approccio olistico che è stato sollevato anche prima. Definitivamente ci troviamo a affrontare questo argomento per la prima volta. Sì, è vero, tra virgolette in ritardo. Il vantaggio è che ci muoviamo come prima piattaforma la più importante al mondo, quindi è con una potenza di mercato enorme perché i numeri del giro d'affari sono molto importanti. Sono affascinato, io stesso ho lavorato sul benessere animale tanti anni, quando confronto il giro d'affari di questo settore verso il mercato per esempio dell'allevamento suinicolo. Questo giro d'affari supera abbondantemente certi dati della zootecnia ed è un settore che questi dati appariranno nel nostro documento che verrà presto pubblicato. È un settore importante per un'economia che sta crescendo in termini di impiego, è un dato che non è stato detto, ma dal lavoro di chi è nel settore veterinario a chi è nel settore della cura e nel settore dell'addestramento, nell'allevamento, stiamo parlando di milioni di posti di lavoro. È chiaro che lo strumento delle vendite di internet è uno strumento che ha sì purtroppo facilitato la frode, l'abbiamo visto, ma è stato anche uno strumento di crescita per un settore. Dal punto di vista della proporzionalità, è chiaro che è un settore dove la Commissione intende intervenire per aumentare la trasparenza e la sicurezza di chi compra e di chi vende, perché infatti la prima testimonianza che abbiamo raccolto negli incontri che abbiamo avuti è di un allevatore e commerciante di cuccioli belga che ha notificato a noi la prima cosa è la concorrenza sleale, a cui questo onesto e veramente efficiente operatore commerciale, perché alla fine è un venditore di cani, ma in effetti con delle conoscenze e delle competenze notevoli, un senso di responsabilità importante, ma il tutto penalizzato da un commercio sleale che approfitta di queste frodi che noi abbiamo visto. Discuterne ora domanda anche una discussione politica, è chiaro, delle decisioni da prendere. La Commissione ha tagliato in questo momento una proposta bilanciata, come deve essere, sulla base dei dati di cui abbiamo a disposizione. Ed ecco perché il commercio online rimane un elemento importante per il consumatore europeo e per il produttore, tra virgolette, chiamiamolo così, europeo. Per quanto riguarda il discorso dei cani utilizzati per la caccia e delle crudeltà a cui sono sottoposti, purtroppo sono realtà che accadono, ma che sono già comunque penalmente perseguitate a livello giuridico in molti Stati europei, ovunque. Sono elementi che sono difficili da non condannare, e sono condannati penalmente anche in molti paesi europei. Ecco perché il limite tra la competenza europea e la competenza nazionale qui va letto in un certo senso, cioè c'è un principio di sussidiarietà che va applicato. Non abbiamo altri elementi da dire su questo perché siamo al corrente di queste questioni, ma il governo spagnolo è responsabile a tutti gli effetti, come gli altri governi, di seguire dal punto di vista penale questo tipo di crudeltà. Concentrarsi su questi elementi comunque per la prima volta e ne siamo lieti di essere qui. È importante per i cittadini europei, definitivamente. Questo l'abbiamo sentito subito, non appena il Consiglio, i gruppi di lavoro al Consiglio con la Presidenza belga hanno iniziato a lavorare. Non abbiamo mai visto così tanti esperti degli Stati membri pronti a fornirci i dati e pronti a cercare di fare una rapida soluzione, per cui il messaggio anche qui, abbiamo le elezioni, un elemento che ritarderà in un certo senso i lavori, ma vediamo l'urgenza, la capiamo per come i cittadini europei hanno rivolto veramente dei commenti positivi a quanto si sta facendo qui, e parlo dell'avvicinamento tra questa sede e la casa di tutti, non solo gli italiani, quando parlo di casa mia, ma degli europei.
Thank you very much. And listening to all of you, I must say honestly, there are some parts which are not in the scope. I mean, we very welcome what is already there and that we work on this. And you said it also now, Andrea. But when listening to you, I was really thinking, don't we need a general directive or even regulation on animal welfare in order really to prohibit what is happening to these hunting dogs, and not only to them. I could also speak of a lot of other animals. I know as Animal Welfare Intergroup we ask already for that, to have a more general animal welfare directive, let's call it like that. And also listening to you again come the idea we definitely need, and Lucy showed it also, no, it was also Alicia, that it's really cross-sector where we need to speak about animal welfare. So that's why we definitely need also a commissioner that has in his title also the animal welfare, in order to have this cross-sectoral approach. But thank you very much. I will come really to the closing remarks. So the prospect for better protection of welfare of dogs and cats, and maybe also other companion animals. Thank you also, Manuela, for mentioning that. To the new EU legislation is invigorating for all of us who have asked this for many, many years. The European Parliament, remember, had called, I was not there yet, but in a resolution of 2016 for measures to address the illegal pet trade, notably through the introduction of a harmonized system for the identification and registration of cats and dogs in databases that are interoperable, which is important, of course. And at the beginning of this term, the European Parliament also adopted a resolution on protecting the EU's internal market and consumer rights against the negative implications of the illegal trade in companion animals. And all this was very well explained today. So it was very compelling to hear about those findings today in the EU action plan on the illegal pet trade, and about the proposed solutions to address this issue, which include enhanced controls, training, effective enforcement of law, and stronger penalties. To close, I would like to give a special thanks to the members of the intergroup working on the companion animals, to Petras, he's gone now, but to Petras Astrevicius, but also to Manuela Ripa for their regular. About the next session will be on the 14th of March, so note in your agenda already, it will be on poultry welfare, and the Animal Welfare Intergroup will then have his last session for this legislative period on the 25th of April 2024, and it will be a joyful come together at that day to celebrate the accomplishment, but also remember the drawbacks. So on this occasion, again, we will also encourage the candidates for the European Elections 2024 to commit themselves with the pledge, as I told already at the beginning, for animal welfare in the electoral campaign. So you are all warmly invited to join us for that. And let me use my very last minute to welcome a new member in this intergroup, and this is Guy Lavocat from Renew. So very happy, always good to see a new member in this intergroup of animal welfare. I don't know if you want to use the very last second to say some words.
Yes. Merci beaucoup, Tilly. Je remercie aussi Pascal Durand qui m'a invité à rejoindre et qui est très reconnu en France pour la défense de la cause des animaux. Hein, c'est vraiment un symbole en France, quel que soit son choix politique. Et je suis très fier, au nom de mes 3 chats et de ma famille, de rejoindre cette belle intergroupe qui est transpartisan. Donc ça montre que la cause animale, c'est pas quelque chose de politique, c'est quelque chose de sociétal. Et voilà, je suis vraiment très fier et je serai fidèle aux travaux et aux valeurs, puisqu'il y a des valeurs derrière tout ça, de cet intergroupe que j'essaierai de défendre dans mon groupe Renew et dans ma délégation française. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Guy, et bienvenue. Et alors, il y a le petit QR code où on peut s'engager effectivement. Ah, bah, c'est très bien, il a déjà soulevé. Donc, nous, on est très contents de t'avoir dans cet intergroupe. Et du coup, à vous, to all of you, I wish you a very nice day. Thank you very much again to the interpreters for the excellent work and for their patience, but for once I'm in the time, so I will stop there. Thank you again to the experts, it was really interesting, and also from our guest on the national park, which I will visit, that's for sure. Thank you very much, and for this great book, of course. Thank you.